the fury of the Fireborn, as the dragon unleashes its roar. The emergency siren screamed through Research Station Epsilon. Red lights flashed in every corridor as scientists and technicians ran toward the evacuation pods. Their faces showed pure terror. Everyone knew what was coming. A Dracorian ship had entered their star system. In the main control room, Station Commander Williams watched the radar screen with shaking hands. The alien vessel moved closer with each passing second. It was massive, nearly 3 times the size of their entire research station. Heat signatures showed temperatures that could melt steel. "All personnel to evacuation pods immediately," Williams announced over the speakers. His voice tried to sound calm, but fear crept through every word. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Sarah Chen stood in her laboratory on the lower deck, surrounded by data screens and audio equipment. She had spent 3 years studying the Dracorians from a safe distance. Now one was coming here, and she felt her heart race with excitement mixed with fear. Her assistant Marcus burst through the door. "Sarah, we have to go now. A Dracorian ship is less than an hour away." 6 hours? You knew for 6 hours and didn't tell anyone. "Marcus, what if we're wrong about them? Every species that's ever encountered them either died or ran away." "Sarah, they're monsters." Only then did the Dracorian ship fire back. "And look here." He had never looked at it this way before. "I don't know, but Sarah, we need to leave. Now. Please think about this." Emotional variations. I think their roars are language. A deep, powerful roar filled the laboratory. It started low and built to a crescendo, then fell into a series of shorter sounds that almost seemed musical. The sound made Marcus's bones vibrate. "Now listen to this one from a different Dracorian ship in a completely different sector," Sarah continued. She played another recording. The roar was different but had similar patterns in certain sections. "Do you hear it?" Sarah asked. "Those repeated sequences. Those are too consistent to be random. That's communication." "Even if you're right," Marcus said, "how do you plan to talk to them? We don't have any common language." "It contains prime numbers, harmonic ratios, and what I hope they'll recognize as peaceful intentions. You can try your theories another day. Maybe we can see them clearly because we're not blinded by old terror." "Then I'm staying too." She activated her communications equipment and aimed the transmission array toward the approaching Dracorian ship. Her fingers moved across the controls, loading the message she had prepared. It was simple but filled with hope. Mathematical sequences that any intelligent species would recognize. Harmonic frequencies arranged in patterns that suggested curiosity and peace. And at the end, a question rendered in pure sound. "Can we talk?" Sarah took a deep breath and pressed the transmission button. The message shot through space toward the massive alien vessel. Now there was nothing to do but wait. The station fell silent except for the distant hum of life support systems. Everyone else had evacuated. Only Sarah and Marcus remained, watching the radar screen as the Dracorian ship grew closer and closer. "What do you think will happen?" Marcus whispered. Sarah watched the screen. "I honestly don't know. But I'd rather try and fail than run away, and always wonder what might have been possible." Designs covered its surface that might have been decorations or might have been something else entirely. It looked ancient and powerful. Suddenly, the ship stopped moving. It hung in space just outside weapon range of the station. Sarah and Marcus held their breath. Then the communications array lit up. A signal was coming from the Dracorian ship. They were responding. Sarah's hands trembled as she played the incoming transmission. The sound that filled her laboratory was unlike anything she had ever heard. It was a roar, yes, but layered with complexity that made her previous recordings seem simple. There were harmonics within harmonics, emotional depth that she could feel even without understanding the words. But within that alien roar, Sarah heard something that made her heart leap. The mathematical sequences she had sent were repeated back to her, slightly altered but clearly recognizable. And then new patterns, like a question being asked in return. Marcus stared at the audio display in shock. They answered. They actually answered. For the first time in galactic history, someone was having a conversation with the Dracorians. "Marcus," she said with wonder in her voice, "I think we just changed everything." Sarah worked through the night, building her response to the Dracorian ship. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she layered mathematical patterns with harmonic frequencies. Marcus brought her coffee and watched the communications array nervously. "How do you know what to say to them?" Marcus asked. "I'm not saying words," Sarah explained. "I'm sharing concepts. Look, I'm sending them images of our solar system, then pointing to this station. Then I'm using sound to express curiosity and friendship." The message traveled through space to the waiting Dracorian vessel. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Sarah wondered if she had made a mistake. Suddenly, the Dracorian ship moved, but it didn't attack. Instead, it slowly rotated, showing different sides of its hull to the station's cameras. Sarah gasped as she realized what she was seeing. "They're showing us their ship," she whispered. "Marcus, they're introducing themselves." This time the Dracorian sounds were softer, more varied. Sarah's computer struggled to process all the layers of information. When the analysis finished, Sarah laughed with pure joy. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "They sent us their name. Well, not a name exactly. More like an identity." Sarah played the sound again. "This low rumble here represents their species. These higher tones are this specific individual. It translates roughly to something like Ember of the Morning Star." "That's actually kind of beautiful." It was temperature, rhythm, and emotion all woven together. Then Ember sent a message that changed everything. Sarah's computer translated it into simple concepts: request, meeting, face-to-face, peace intention. "He wants to come aboard the station," Sarah said quietly. Marcus went pale. "A Dracorian, inside the station. Sarah, the corridors aren't even big enough. The environmental controls can handle extreme temperatures." "It's showing trust." Marcus stood beside her, also suited up. 5 other crew members who had refused to evacuate watched from behind reinforced glass in the observation room above. The outer bay doors opened slowly. Space appeared beyond them, black and filled with stars. Then a shape blocked out those stars. Ember's ship had positioned itself directly outside. A smaller craft detached from the main vessel. It was still huge, but small enough to fit through the bay doors. The craft entered slowly, carefully. Sarah could see scorch marks on its hull. This ship had seen battles. The craft landed on the bay floor with a heavy thud that shook the entire station. The bay doors closed behind it. Atmosphere flooded back into the space. Temperature readings on Sarah's suit display climbed rapidly. Then the Dracorian craft opened. Sarah had seen images of Dracorians before. She had studied their biology in detail, but nothing prepared her for seeing Ember in person. He was enormous. His body was covered in scales that shimmered between deep red and gold. Each scale looked harder than diamond. His head was massive, with eyes that glowed like molten metal. When he breathed, small wisps of smoke escaped his nostrils. His wings were folded against his back but still took up incredible space. Marcus took a step backward. Sarah held her ground. Ember moved with surprising grace despite his size. He lowered his head to bring his eyes level with Sarah's. Those eyes studied her carefully. Sarah could feel the intelligence behind them. This was no mindless creature. This was a person. Ember opened his mouth slightly. Sarah tensed, remembering that Dracorians could breathe plasma hot enough to cut through metal. But instead of attacking, Ember produced a low, gentle rumble. It was the sound equivalent of her name as he understood it. Sarah touched her chest. "Sarah," she said aloud, knowing he couldn't understand the words but hoping he'd grasp the meaning. Ember rumbled again, trying to recreate the sound. It came out deeper, more resonant but recognizable. Then Ember did something unexpected. He reached into a compartment on his craft and pulled out an object. It was a sculpture, small in his massive claws but about the size of Sarah's head. The sculpture showed two figures, clearly different species, reaching toward each other. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. She understood the message perfectly. This wasn't just first contact. This was a gift, a symbol of hope. "Marcus," she said softly, "get the translation interface running. We need to start really communicating." Ember's vocal range was so much broader than human hearing that Sarah's equipment could barely capture it all. But gradually, understanding grew. Ember explained that his species called themselves the Drakkar. They had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. But every time they approached another civilization, that civilization attacked first and asked questions never. "Fear," Sarah said, using the new interface to translate her words into Drakkarian concepts. "They feared you because you looked dangerous. Your sounds were different, not fear, not aggression, curiosity, hope. We have not heard hope from others in many generations." Ember was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, Sarah heard sadness in his translated voice. "We want what all people want, to share our stories, to learn from others, to not be alone in the universe. We create, not destroy, but the galaxy only sees our fire and runs away. I see someone brave enough to hope. No old fears, maybe others will listen to you." But she also thought about Ember's gift, about his gentle rumble when he said her name, about the loneliness of an entire species. "Yes," Sarah said, "we'll help you. I can't promise success, but humans will try." He produced a sound that Sarah's interface translated as gratitude mixed with relief and joy. "There is much to do," Sarah said. "I need to contact the Galactic Council. You should probably return to your ship for now. Some humans are still very scared. Call everyone back to the station, and get me a direct line to Earth. We need to tell them that humanity just made the most important friend in the galaxy." "You really think this will work?" That's already more than they've ever had before. But for the first time in 3 years of studying the Drakkar, Sarah felt certain she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. Above the station, Ember's ship waited patiently. Inside, Ember looked at the small research station and felt something his people had almost forgotten. He felt hope. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session. Representatives from 47 different species filled the chamber, their holographic forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. All of them looked nervous. "Dr. Chen," the council speaker began, "you claim the Drakkarians are peaceful. But for 3,000 years, every encounter with them has ended in violence. The Drakkarians only defended themselves. Does that make every human dangerous, or does it matter how we choose to use those tools?" Chen. But the vote was close, and Sarah knew many species remained deeply skeptical. 2 days later, Sarah boarded Ember's ship with a small human delegation. There was Marcus, now her official assistant, Dr. James Rodriguez, a xenoanthropologist, Lieutenant K. Washington, a security officer who insisted on coming for protection, and young Tommy Chen, Sarah's nephew and a talented musician. Tommy had begged to come. "Aunt Sarah, you said they communicate through sound. I need to hear their music." And the harmonics contained layers of meaning that human ears could barely detect. When they arrived at the Drakkarian homeworld, Sarah gasped. The planet was beautiful beyond imagination. Floating cities drifted in the upper atmosphere, their structures made from crystallized plasma shaped into impossible forms. Massive sculptures hung in the sky, catching sunlight and throwing rainbow colors across the clouds. "We build with fire," Ember explained. "It is our art, our history, our soul." Elders with scales that had darkened to deep purple with age, watched from elevated platforms. But not everyone looked welcoming. A group of Dracorians stood apart, their body language radiating disapproval. Their leader was an ancient Dracorian whose scales were almost black. Ember approached him respectfully. "Honored Ash of Forgotten Wars," Ember said in Dracorian. The translation device on Sarah's belt converted his words to English. "These are the humans I spoke of. They wish to help us." "No one is different," Ash replied coldly. He turned and walked away, followed by his supporters. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm air. "How many Dracorians feel like Ash does?" she asked Ember quietly. "Too many," Ember admitted. "We have been hurt too often. Trust is difficult for my people now." By breathing precise patterns of plasma, they could freeze moments in crystal that other Dracorians could read by running their claws over the surface. James was fascinated. "It's like three-dimensional poetry," he said, studying a sculpture that depicted an ancient Dracorian explorer discovering a new star. Tommy made the biggest breakthrough. One evening, he pulled out his guitar and began playing a simple melody. The Dracorians nearby stopped what they were doing. A young Dracorian named Spark dancing through clouds crept closer, her scales shimmering with curiosity. "What is that?" Spark asked through the translator. She was young, maybe equivalent to a human teenager. "Music," Tommy explained. "Humans make it for joy, for sadness, for celebration. It helps us express feelings." Spark began to hum, a deep resonant sound that made the air vibrate. Tommy listened carefully, then picked out the melody on his guitar. The notes blended together in a way that surprised both of them. Soon other Dracorians joined in, creating layers of sound. Tommy played faster, and the Dracorians matched his rhythm. Sarah watched with tears in her eyes as human and Dracorian made music together for the first time in history. But the moment of joy was interrupted. Ember approached Sarah with concern written across his features. "Sarah, I must show you something," he said quietly. "Something we have not shared with anyone outside our species." "Satyr, these are our children who were never born," Ember explained. His voice carried deep pain. "For the last 500 years, fewer and fewer eggs have hatched successfully. Our population shrinks with each generation. Our scientists reached the same conclusion. We need contact with other species, not for war or conquest, but for survival. We need allies who can help us. We need friends who can share knowledge and resources. This is why your message meant so much to me. You might be our last chance." Kay, who had been silent most of the trip, spoke up. "We need to document everything, every peaceful interaction, every piece of Dracorian culture. When we return to the council, we need proof that contradicts 3,000 years of fear." They documented how Dracorian families cared for their young with gentleness and patience. They showed how Dracorians resolved disputes through mediated discussion rather than violence. Spark became their constant companion and guide. She was endlessly curious about humans, asking questions about everything from human food to human emotions. She especially loved music sessions with Tommy. "Humans are small and soft," Spark said one day, "but you have such big spirits. You came all this way just to understand us. No one has ever done that before." One evening, Ember invited Sarah to the highest platform in the city. They watched the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you really think this will work?" Ember asked. "Do you think the galaxy will ever accept us?" "I think change is hard. Fear is comfortable because it's familiar. But I also think the galaxy is ready for something new. And I think you and your people deserve the chance to prove who you really are. You could have run like everyone else. Instead, you stayed. You listened. You cared. When everyone says something is impossible, we tend to take that as a challenge." Other species watched nervously to see if humanity's gamble would pay off. But here, in this moment, Sarah felt peace. She had seen the truth about the Dracorians. Now she just needed to help the rest of the galaxy see it too. Far below, Tommy and Spark were creating another musical piece together, their different forms of sound blending into something beautiful and new. The other young Dracorians had joined them, their voices rising into the night air. It sounded like hope. And hope, Sarah thought, was the most powerful force in the universe. Sarah was preparing her final report when the alarms began. The peaceful Dracorian city erupted into chaos as warning signals flashed across every communication device. Ember burst into the human quarters, his scales darkened with stress. "We are under attack," he said urgently. "A Krillian battle fleet has entered our atmosphere. They are firing on the city." The Krillians were one of the most militaristic species in the galaxy. They had voted against her proposal at the council meeting. "Why?" Marcus asked, already gathering their emergency equipment. "Why would they attack now?" "Afraid that if we make peace with others, we will become too powerful." Dracorian structures that had stood for centuries began to crack and fall. "We need to get you to safety," Ember said, herding the humans toward an evacuation route. "What about your people?" Sarah demanded. "We will defend our home." Dracorian defenders took to the sky, their wings carrying them toward the attacking ships. Sarah watched through a reinforced window as Ember and dozens of other Dracorians engaged the Krillian fleet. The Dracorians were magnificent in flight. They moved with grace and power, their plasma breath lighting up the sky. But Sarah noticed something that made her grab her recording equipment. "Kay, are you seeing this?" she shouted over the noise. Lieutenant Washington was already filming. "Yes. They're not going for maximum damage." When a ship's engines failed, Dracorians would create a cushion of heated air to slow its fall, preventing it from crashing catastrophically. "They're protecting their attackers," Marcus said in amazement. "Even while being attacked, they're trying not to cause unnecessary harm." He roared, a sound so powerful that it shook the air itself. Every Dracorian in the sky heard and understood. They converged on the battleship, not to destroy it, but to push it away from the city. Sarah watched through her camera as dozens of Dracorians used their combined strength to physically move the massive ship. Their claws gripped its hull. Their wings beat furiously. Slowly, impossibly, the battleship began to drift away from the populated area. But the Krillian commander refused to back down. He ordered his ship to fire anyway. The main weapon discharged, sending a beam of destructive energy toward the city. Ember threw himself into the beam's path. The energy struck his scales, and he roared in pain. Other Dracorians joined him, creating a living shield. The beam scattered against their combined resistance, losing most of its destructive power. The weakened beam struck the edge of the city, causing damage but not the catastrophic destruction the Krillians had intended. Ember and the other Dracorians fell from the sky, their scales scorched and smoking. "No!" Spark screamed. The young Dracorian had stayed with the humans during the battle. Now she watched her mentor fall. Without thinking, she launched herself into the air, rushing toward Ember. Tommy ran to the window. "Spark, come back." The Krillian forces, seeing their main weapon fail, began a full assault. More ships poured into the atmosphere. The situation was becoming desperate. Then something unexpected happened. Ash of Forgotten Wars, the elder who had opposed contact with humans, flew to the center of the battle. His ancient voice boomed across all channels. "Drakkar, hear me," he called. "For too long I have counseled isolation. I have preached that others cannot be trusted. But look at these Krillians. Look at their unprovoked attack. And look at the humans below, who stayed with us even when death approached. And if we are to survive, we must be different too. We must show the galaxy who we truly are." A song that carried the soul of an entire species. Every Dracorian in the sky joined the song. Their combined voices created harmonics that shook the very air. The Krillian ship's instruments went haywire from the sonic vibrations. But the Dracorians weren't attacking. They were communicating. The song told the story of their species, their isolation, their loneliness, their desire for peace. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and powerful. In the Krillian flagship, Commander Xerex listened to the song. His translator struggled to convey all the emotional layers, but enough came through. For the first time, he truly understood what they were attacking. "Cease fire," he ordered quietly. "Sir," his weapons officer asked in confusion. "I said cease fire," Xerex shouted. "All ships stand down immediately." This footage would change everything. Below, medical teams rushed to help the injured. Spark stayed with Ember, who was badly hurt but alive. The young Dracorian's scales were dimmed with worry. "You saved me," Ember said weakly. "You taught me," Spark replied. "You taught me that protecting others is what makes us strong." Tommy knelt beside them. "Spark, can I try something?" The combined sound of human music and Dracorian voices created something magical. Ember's breathing became steadier. His scales began to brighten slightly. "Music heals," an elder Dracorian said in wonder. The humans knew this. They brought healing through sound. She saw Krillians helping to rescue trapped Dracorians from damaged buildings. She saw Ash of Forgotten Wars welcoming Krillian medics who offered to help treat the wounded. She saw enemies becoming something else. Kay continued filming everything. The Council needs to see this. Every species in the galaxy needs to see this. They had defended themselves with restraint and mercy. They had protected their attackers from unnecessary harm. And in their darkest moment, they had chosen song over violence. If this didn't prove who the Dracorians truly were, nothing would. As the sun set on the damaged but standing city, Sarah looked at the Dracorians and Krillians working side by side to repair the destruction. She looked at Tommy and Spark creating music together despite the horror they had witnessed. "We're not done yet," Marcus said beside her. "But I think we might actually succeed." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah stood at the center podium, her recording equipment connected to the main display. Behind her, Ember waited. It was the first time a Dracorian had ever been invited into the council chambers. "Honored representatives," Sarah began, "3 months ago you gave humanity permission to attempt contact with the Dracorians. Today, I present our findings." The council watched in silence as the massive Dracorian carefully presented his gift sculpture to the small human scientist. "This is not a monster," Sarah said quietly. "This is a person capable of art, kindness, and hope." It showed Dracorian cities floating in the sky, their beauty undeniable. It showed Tommy and Spark making music together. It showed Dracorian parents teaching their children, elders sharing wisdom, artists creating sculptures from plasma and crystal. Then Sarah showed the attack footage. The council watched as Krillian ships fired on the peaceful city without warning. They saw Dracorians defend their home while carefully avoiding unnecessary destruction. They witnessed Ember and others forming a living shield to protect civilians, even at great cost to themselves. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The Krillian representative stood up, his face showing shame and anger. "The attack was unauthorized," Commander Xerex said, his voice heavy with regret. "I have been removed from my command for initiating it, but I ask permission to speak." "I attacked because I was afraid," Xerex admitted publicly. "For generations, my people have been taught that Dracorians are monsters. I believed that if they made alliances, they would become unstoppable, so I decided to strike first. I was wrong. What I saw as strength to be feared was actually restraint. You could have destroyed my entire fleet. Instead, you disabled our ships and protected my crews from crashing. Even when I ordered my weapons to fire on your children, you used your own bodies as shields. I have never been more ashamed of anything in my military career. The Drakkar accept your apology and offer friendship in return." She showed the medical reports proving Dracorian population decline. She presented scientific data about their culture, their biology, their desperate need for connection with other species. The Dracorians are not asking for charity, Sarah explained. They are asking for what every species deserves, the chance to be known for who they truly are, not what fear imagines them to be. But how can we be certain this is not an elaborate deception? Honored Council, Spark began nervously, I am Spark dancing through clouds. I am 17 cycles old. That is young for my people. I have never met another species before the humans came. All my life, I heard stories of how other species fear us, how they attack before talking, how we are alone forever. I believed I would grow old having never made a single friend from beyond our world. They were not afraid to learn about us. Tommy taught me human music. Sarah taught me that curiosity is stronger than fear. And when the Krillians attacked, these soft, small humans stayed with us. They could have fled to safety, but they chose to stand with us. You missed the chance to prove that the galaxy can grow beyond old fears. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. The representative from Vex Prime, a species known for their careful neutrality, stood up. I move that we accept formal diplomatic relations with the Dracorian species, with humanity serving as primary liaisons during the initial integration period. Even those who had initially opposed the idea found themselves swayed by the evidence and by Spark's heartfelt plea. The final vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. The Dracorians would be welcomed into the galactic community. Ember stood silently as the results were announced. Sarah saw moisture gathering in his eyes. Dracorians could cry after all, she realized. They just rarely had reason to. Thank you, Ember said simply. His voice carried across the chamber through the translation devices. Thank you for seeing us. But understanding is worth the effort. Sarah watched from her laboratory as a group of Dracorian youngsters played with alien children from 6 different species. They were creating a massive collaborative art piece, combining plasma sculpture with traditional painting, holographic light, and crystal singing. Spark and Tommy performed regular concerts that were broadcast across multiple worlds. Their music had become surprisingly popular, inspiring others to try combining their own cultural art forms. Commander Xerex had personally volunteered to lead the Krillian diplomatic mission to the Dracorian homeworld. He spent his days helping rebuild the structures his attack had damaged, and his evenings learning Dracorian history. Ash of Forgotten Wars, once the voice of isolation, had become the Dracorian ambassador of cultural heritage. He traveled to different worlds, sharing Dracorian stories and teaching others about their ancient traditions. Marcus entered Sarah's lab carrying 2 cups of coffee. The council just announced they're establishing permanent exchange programs. Dracorian artists will teach at universities across the galaxy. You actually changed galactic history. The Dracorians did it by choosing peace even when attacked. They wanted to celebrate with the humans who had made everything possible. When Ember arrived, he brought gifts, sculptures for each team member, each one depicting a moment from their journey together. Sarah's sculpture showed a small human figure and a large Dracorian figure reaching toward each other across empty space. This is how it began, Ember explained. 2 different beings, choosing connection over fear. Humans, Dracorians, Krillians, and representatives from a dozen other species. Tommy brought his guitar. Spark hummed the opening notes of a new song. As the music filled the room, Sarah looked around at the impossible gathering. Different species, different languages, different forms, but all of them together, sharing this moment of peace and friendship. The galaxy had spent 3,000 years running from the Dracorians. Now, finally, it was running toward them, and the universe was better for it. Ember caught Sarah's eye and nodded his great head in thanks. Sarah nodded back. No words were needed. The song continued, rising through the station and out into space. It carried a message that would echo across the stars for generations to come. Fear divides, but understanding unites. And when you choose to listen instead of run, when you choose curiosity instead of terror, you might discover that the most fearsome roar is really just someone singing a song of hope. The fury of the Fireborn had become the symphony of the Fireborn, and the galaxy would never be the same.